Hello, today's story is about Anansi, and it's one that I sent to my granddaughter during the first lockdown, which is why today we have, ta-da, pictures. Not very many, but there are some to go with the story. So, Anansi was half man, half spider. He was very clever and he was very tricky. He was also very, very lazy, and sometimes his cleverness could make him seem unkind to creatures who might be a little slower than himself on the uptake. But he was also very, very funny, and that's why when the people who first told the Anansi stories were stolen away and taken as slaves to work on the other side of the world, they took the stories of Anansi with them to share with their children. Now, one morning, Anansi, who I've already told you was very, very lazy, was working in his garden. He had tricked some monkeys a few months earlier into planting some yams at the bottom down near the stream, and the yams were now ready for eating. And yams were on Anansi's list of 250,000 things that he really loved to eat best in the whole wide world, which is why he was digging them up. He filled a basket with the yams and took them down to the stream and washed off all of the mud. Now, yams, in case you don't know, are a little bit like sweet potatoes or jacket potatoes, and they can be roasted in an oven. So Anansi took his back up to his kitchen, but he couldn't just switch his oven on like we do today. No, he had to make a fire, for Anansi's oven was more like a sort of cupboard in the wall, and the fire was lit underneath it. He gathered sticks and small logs, and eventually he had a fire blazing, and the oven was hot enough for him to put the yams inside to roast. Now all he had to do was wait. But Anansi wasn't very good at being patient, so he rushed around laying the table and getting out even the big pat of butter that he had bought to smother all over his yams when they were cooked. Soon the smell of the roasting yams filled the house, and Anansi's tummy rumbled. Ooh. He thought he would burst waiting, but at last, around about tea time, the yams were ready to eat, and Anansi took them from the oven and carried them on a great plate to the table. He was just about to take the largest one to start eating when there was a knock on the door. Anansi was horrified. He hadn't invited anybody round, and he didn't want any visitors coming at this moment, because everyone knew that anyone who called around when you were eating would have to be invited to share the meal with you, and Anansi did not want to share his yams. He opened the door a very small way and saw his friend Turtle waiting outside. He was not happy. "Hello, Anansi," said Turtle. "I'm on my way back to my pool from meeting my sister, and I'm very tired, and it's still a long way to go. I couldn't help smelling something quite delicious coming from your house as I went past, and I was wondering if, as is the custom, you wouldn't mind sharing some of your tea with me." Well, Anansi had no choice. Grumpily he invited Turtle indoors, and he sat him at the table, and then he went to get him a plate. But as he handed the plate to Turtle, he got an idea. "Turtle," he said, as his friend reached across for a yam from the plate, "do you mean to insult me? I know that it is the custom to have people stay, but you must also remember that it is the custom when you are sharing a meal with a friend to have your hands clean and washed. Look at yours." Now, it's true, when Turtle looked down at his hands, because he normally walked on all fours, his were very, very muddy, and he was quite horrified. "Oh, Anansi," he said, "I shall go down to the stream and wash them straight away." And that's what he did. When he came back, he found Anansi sitting in front of a plate of yams that looked a lot smaller than it had when he first set out. But he sat down again, and this time once more he reached across for a yam from the plate. But again Anansi looked at him and said, "Turtle, I thought you had gone to wash your hands. Why, they are dirtier than before." And when Turtle looked at his hands, he realised that was true, because where Anansi had been digging down by the stream, there was mud all over the garden. "I'll go again," he said. And this time on the way back, he made sure that he tried to jump from just using his back legs, which was very difficult and took him a long time. But at last he came back into the room and sat down, just as Anansi was rubbing his tummy and mopping his chin with a cloth. There was not a single yam left on the plate. Oh, and said Anansi, I thought, Turtle, when you were gone for such a long time, that you changed your mind and decided to go home. I have eaten all the yams. I'm so sorry. Let me find you something else. I'm sure I must have something tucked away. And he came back with a very wrinkled and very bruised-looking apple. This is all I have. Here, friend. So Turtle ate the really nasty apple and then had to leave on his way home. But he couldn't help feeling that he had been tricked. So as he was going, he called out to Anansi, Anansi, if you are ever passing my pool, call in and I will give you a feast such as you gave me today. When Anansi shut the door, he did a little dance because everybody knew that Turtle was the finest cook in the whole of the forest. It was really difficult for him to wait a week before he thought it would be a reasonable time to be able to go and visit Turtle. But on that day he got up and he put on his finest new waistcoat and his hat, and he set off towards his friend's pool. He arrived just around about tea time, and he found Turtle sitting on a rock in the middle of the water, like that. Well, Turtle had sort of been expecting Anansi, so he said, I'm so glad to see you. Have you come to share a meal with me? Let me go down and prepare it. You are in luck, for I have been baking all day. Anansi's tummy rumbled, and he waited while Turtle disappeared below the water. He waited and waited and waited, and at last Turtle bobbed up and said to him, Right, everything is ready, Anansi. Just come down whenever you're ready. Now, Anansi was so excited he ran and he jumped into the water. But Anansi was a spider and he didn't weigh very much, and he couldn't sink down below the surface. He just kept bobbing on the top like a cork. He got out and he ran and he dived in head first, but it made no difference. He bobbed along the top of the water just like before. He ran a very long way. He jumped as hard as he could with his knees tucked up under his chin, but it didn't make any difference. Bob, bob, bob on the top of the water. He got out and was very fed up. He kicked at a stone, and as it plopped into the water, an idea came to Anansi. Quickly he began to stuff stones into the pockets of his jacket and put a really large one under his hat. Then, holding on to the hat, he ran to the pond and he jumped up into the air and sunk right the way down to the bottom. Laid out on a red and white checked tablecloth was an array of food such as Anansi had never seen before. Everything looked delicious. There were leaves of all colours of green, and there were some strange purple buns. Everything that Anansi couldn't wait to try. Oh, I thought you weren't going to come, said Turtle. Here, why don't you take a plate and go over to the table and help yourself to something? Anansi picked up the plate, and just as he was about to head towards the table, Turtle looked at him and said in horror, Anansi, do you mean to insult me? Why, you must know that here it is the custom that anyone about to eat with a friend does not do it wearing their hat and their coat. Here, let me help you. And he knocked Anansi's hat off. Anansi rose just a little bit off the surface of the pond, of the floor of the pond. No, he said, it's cold down here. I need to be wearing my jacket. But Turtle would not take no for an answer. He already had hold of the shoulders, and he was yanking at the jacket as hard as he could. He pulled it off, and it landed with a boom on the floor, and Anansi shot like a bullet from a gun right the way back, where he continued, as before, to bob on the surface. Realising that he was defeated, Anansi got out of the pond and began to make his way home. I'm sure I've got some honey and some bread somewhere, he said to himself as he was walking. It's a clever trick Turtle played on me. He knew I had those stones in my pocket. Still, it was worth tricking him the first time round, because they were, after all, some very lovely yams. Here is Turtle eating what was left of the feast that he had made for Anansi, and you can see he looks very, very pleased with himself. So that's the story of Anansi and Turtle, and I do hope that you enjoyed it, including the pictures.